related to attorney-client privileged communications. I mean, that's untenable for me. And so if that's the policy, then we need to talk to someone about getting a city email address that we can use.
I don't think the way that records are turned over means looking at your emails.
Well, that's my question.
I think it means
search.
How's it done?
Yeah.
So let's say a request comes in wanting for emails related to the charter amendment. Then you would be asked to turn over any such emails, or maybe just forward them.
But I'm assuming that if it was a lawsuit, the attorney assigned that has some obligation to make sure that the search is reasonable and it's done. I mean, I know I have that obligation in my own lawsuits, and so I would be concerned that I then could be approached by a city attorney who then wants to somehow oversee some search with my email search. So I'm just raising this issue as a concern, and why I'm aware of it, but I would echo what Commissioner Pritchett said, that if that's the case, and we and completely understand that our emails related to official business are discoverable and are subject to public records, well, then it doesn't seem that it should be that difficult for the city to give us an email address that we can then use, an email account, and only use for official business for police review commission purposes.
Okay.
I don't know who we make that recommendation to, or whether we need to agendize that to make that recommendation to the city manager's office or whoever, but that's what I would do. So I suppose, talking this out loud, I would then ask to put this on an agenda so that we can make a request for city email addresses that commissioners can use for official business.
How about if I suggest doing it this way? If I talk to the city attorney's office.
Yeah, that's fine. I would still ask that it be put on the agenda, and the only reason I say that is because if it's resolved before that time, we can remove it from the agenda. But if it's not, I want to have some ability to have some discussion about it and take action on it at the next meeting, which seems like it would be appropriate.
I was just gonna say, you could look at the item that she put in our packet, page 95, and there's a PDF that you could probably pull up and see the opinion written by the California Supreme Court. You see that?
And I read that. I understand that it is discoverable. So, and if we're performing official business, but just on Commissioner Pritchett's issue, which is the same one I have, that's fine. But it seems that we should have some access to some sort of official email account, rather, because it clearly does raise an issue for me to suddenly be subjected to some outside force coming in and from the city or otherwise and reviewing my email server, which I have client confidential documents. You're going to have a direct conflict between my responsibilities, my ethical obligations as an attorney at law, and my obligations as a public commissioner. And to the extent that this meeting itself is a notice to me that my email is not considered to be confidential, then I have an issue with that, because that would create a problem for my attorney-client communications. And so, given that we're going to request at some point, I suspect that other people may want to take advantage of this, but I would request that I be allowed to have an official email address from the city that I can do police review commission business on.
But we also need some certainty that if we were to have that, it would then protect our personal emails. Like, I can imagine that there might be a time that they say, well, have you used your personal email for any business, and they want to search that?
It's not a search. They ask you to turn it over. Then you turn it over. You turn over what you want to turn over.
Well, the question is beyond. I mean, I understand that they could come to you and say to you, can you please do the search yourself? There are circumstances in which you will have court responsibilities as an officer of the court, being the city attorney's office. So, for example, if there is a lawsuit and there is a subpoena served, or there is an official request for documents served to that subpoena, there are requirements that attorneys have to ensure that the employees of the company they represent are doing a full and reasonable search. The case is Qualcomm. And so it may be in circumstances in which it is just asked for you to voluntarily turn over things and there's no separate verification. But what I'm concerned about is in the unique circumstance, and I understand it may not be the normal practice, but the unique circumstance where there is a lawsuit and there is some sort of court order that's requiring an attorney to somehow verify that the search has been complete. And that's where I have a major issue just from a professional standpoint. I would also have it from a privacy standpoint, personally, but I would be it seems to me that this could be addressed easily by giving people a city email address.
Okay, so we'll agendize that. Is there anything else for report, Ms. Lee?
Oh, yes, one more thing, which was, through Sergeant Cummings, Sergeant Fonby had offered to do a de-escalation training for commissioners. He did one for us a couple of years ago, so, and I think there's only a couple of you here who went to that. Yeah. So I wanted to gauge the interest of the commission, and the training, last time it was 2 hours. So it would be, since you have a lot on this agenda, there's a lot on your agenda for September 26th. I'm trying to figure out how you want to fit that in or do a special meeting.
I said, welcome home.
Welcome home, Commissioner Sherman. So I want to get a sense of how, what the desire is of commissioners to do this, and
I'd like it.
I don't know what it is, could you explain?
it would be Sergeant Fonby taking us through basically what our officers get in terms of de-escalation training.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah,
I would think
Sergeant
everybody's
Fonby,
interested, and I think the
Yeah.
question is how, do
Yeah.
you want to do it during a meeting, which would take up most of the meeting, or try and schedule a special meeting or something?
I thought the last presentation you made was really interesting, so, hopefully he's been able to build on it and improve and so forth, so we'll be able to see it. I think it'd be really good to do, because there's a lot of discussion about de-escalation now, and it would be really good to kind of check in with what actually the officers are being presented with, to see if that is works for us or the community.
do we have a full plate at the next meeting already?
We do
Well,
already.
maybe we could put it forward sometime in the
I
next
can ask. He asked specifically for this meeting, I said no.
Oh.
So, okay, so I'm getting a sense maybe first meeting in October, is that what?
If he's available.
Okay. Okay.
Commissioner Sherman, could you
Oh,
explain?
question was asked and answered.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm just curious about, would it make more sense to have a special meeting and do it some other time? It feels like our agenda tends to be.
Is it a 2-hour session?
it's about 2 hours.
I think we need a separate meeting.
I'll
Okay.
vote for that.
So, how about if I do a doodle poll and see what's a good night to have a special meeting, and simultaneously I'll talk to Sergeant Fonby about what his schedule's like. Okay, thank you, that's it for me.
Chief, the report?
Thank you. I'll start with staffing. We're at 160 officers. When we subtract out people who are in academy or in training or in injury or leave, we get down to about 135. It is encouraging. We've had a couple of officers who are requested to be reinstated, people who've left in the past few months who would like to come back. So we're adding a quick couple on here on Sunday or Monday, I believe they return to the department. So that's encouraging, and we've had one or two people who we thought were gonna leave who, although being offered jobs, have declined them and decided instead to stay. So I credit that to having the contract resolved in the sense of one knows what's up for the next 1.5 or 2 years. But that's super encouraging. As I mentioned before, we are starting with putting together a group to work on recruitment and hiring. So we have historically had kind of a pipe of a certain size, which has kept enough people flowing through it to make up for people who leave. What we found is, given the conditions that we're facing kind of across the country in terms of more difficulty in hiring officers, we need to increase the sort of the size of that pipe by adding more folks on task for recruitment and for doing the work associated with trying to get us higher, be more competitive, more agile, and competitive in terms of hiring folks. So one person from each division is going to make up this group of 4 who will officially start work at the timesheet change, which I think is September 23rd. So we'll have a team we're pulling from the department. So their work is being divvied up, shared, or someone's being set aside so they can just focus on this. There are essentially 2 components to it to start. We think this will be a year or 2 effort. One component is to have a recruitment team who can go to events, get others to, or place others to go to recruiting events, whether local or regional, across the state or beyond, so that we have a very agile and fast response, and also the capacity to field people out to recruitment events, and to be imaginative about the kinds of events that we go to. A couple of folks we focused on doing the staff work that's necessary to obtain resources and basically to obtain resources for things we need. For example, the city does not have, and we do not have, a graphic designer. So in terms of creating a good look, a uniform look across recruiting materials and departmental materials, we want to get a recruitment and a recruitment bonus program, which is something we've talked about, I think, here before, and that was set aside till the contract was resolved. So we'll be going to council looking for their approval for a recruitment program. Another example of increasing our capacity is that we currently rely on internal folks to do background investigations. It's like an ancillary duty, and they tend to take what we want to do is to cut down the time, so find qualified folks who can do the backgrounds, but who aren't police officers here. There's a lot of people out there who are doing that, so that we can select somebody for backgrounding and get it back within 2 or 3 weeks instead of 4 to 8 weeks. So we can increase our turnaround time and really jam to get folks hired, whether they're lateral recruits or people who are going to put through academy. So that team will go in kind of full effect on September 24th. And the idea is that we're hoping that within a year to 2 years we'll be able to rebuild in terms of our staffing. Although it is encouraging to see people coming back, we also, just in normal churn and flow, are losing people. So we have a couple people who are leaving, a couple are coming back, so our net is sort of 0 just with that anecdotally. We need to build on that so that we get ourselves staffed back up. So we have the ability to do the other things that we want to do beyond essentially barely or hardly staffing patrol. And the situation we're in with our investigations division, where we're about a third down in terms of investigators. So we need to rebuild so we can get those built back out and then go on to do other things. The contract, at the last meeting, I reported the contract was likely going to be ratified. That was ratified by council. So it's in effect and will last until mid-year 2020. Some other things of potential interest: we have implemented a Narcan program using naloxone, which is a medication. So if somebody is suffering from an opioid overdose, this is a very effective tool to be used by law enforcement as well as medics around the country. It's been quite a long time of research amidst shifting conditions and requirements. Sergeant Tate in our professional standards department was able to navigate those waters and get us to yes with these. So I brought this just as an example. So this is it's a nasal inhaler, and super easy to break out. and use. And what we're doing is putting one of the recommendation is to have 2 doses ready to go. And so these cases, I don't remember how many we got, but several dozen. So there's one in every patrol car, one in many offices. The hazards that you can be experience would be people who are experiencing opioid overdose on the street. So they're passed out, maybe not getting oxygen. You can immediately apply this. Additionally, unfortunately, law enforcement folks around the country and even locally here sometimes get exposed inadvertently to fentanyl, which is super strong and potentially almost immediately fatal. And so we have these not only for folks in our community to run across, but also for our officers. So
Does that counteract fentanyl?
yes. Well, I don't know. As I understand, it's a lifesaver.
Saves a lot of lives.
Yeah.
So
when you hear about folks with these inhalers and applying this medicine, this is what you're seeing. So at any rate, a lot of work went into that. Like I said, conditions shifted and changed, and ultimately we were able to get things done. So I just want to sort of show and tell that. This is the one that lives in my office. But we have them deployed throughout all the vehicles in the fleet so that we have it for when it may matter.
Question on that, Chief.
Go ahead.
Do you have any idea how many people might receive that kind of treatment in Berkeley and annually? I mean, do you have any numbers, any ballpark or anything about?
I don't. Only anecdotally, I know that we deal with people who appear to be
Yeah, I just
suffering from
wonder if there's a
overdose.
lot of people out there, or it's a few, or whatever. Either way, I think it's great that you're
Right.
starting the program.
Mhm.
I think it's a wonderful thing to do, in my opinion, and I applaud you taking the initiative to do it.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't have specific numbers. But
Has it been used yet?
no, it's been out for a week or so. I think we
Yeah,
just
I mean,
got it.
BFD, they've used it, but, so and this is similar to the same mechanism, so.
I would think that if we end up getting a state, we'll report on it because it's an important program, and if we're successful in using it, then we want to share that with the community. Next up, I wanted to call your attention to a card that's been passed out to you, and also we have for the public. The announcement is Barbershop Forum. So the Barbershop Forum is an event. There's a group out in Oakland which puts together these forums. The intent and the goal of them is to foster conversation between folks in the community and police, to build relationships, and to have, this is in my perception, to have discussions kind of in a safe space where it's not uniformed police officers up, and where oftentimes officers are asked to show up just without visible weapons and out of uniform, where people can be frank and talk about what's important to them, what they would like to see in the relationship between police and the community. So this is a program that Sergeant Cummings, whom you know, he's often here for these meetings. Sergeant Cummings brought to my attention and asked if we could participate and actually host one of these, and so the answer to that is yes. And so we will be supporting the forum on September 24th, right here at the South Berkeley Senior Center at 6 p.m. Please feel free to transmit this through your networks to folks, and we hope that people will turn out just for a good conversation, and as far as I'm concerned, a good listening session as we consider community, our relationship with our community, and what community policing should look like based on people's input. So this is just a kind of preliminary step, just the very beginning, but I do want to let you know about that. A couple things, we're working on our wellness and resiliency as a strategic objective of the department, and so a couple things over the past month have gone live. One is that recognizing that folks who work in the building, and especially folks who work all night, may not have access to healthy, good and healthy foods. Sergeant Tate, again, who's been super active supporting our wellness program, sought out a vendor where you can actually order meals ahead, 2, 3, 4 meals. They get brought and left at a refrigerator on our premises, so that those who wish can have a meal at hand, a healthy meal at hand. So we're trying to encourage good choices there. We also have swapped out one of our vending machines, which had the standard stuff that you would see in a vending machine, I think, or at least commonsensically, the most standard things, and instead go with a vending machine stocked with healthier options. So we have a vending machine now in our break room, which is right outside of Communication Center, which offers healthier options for people. And we additionally have installed 2 water coolers that are dispensers for cold water, so we're encouraging the use of bottles. Now, if you've ever seen that, but you put your bottle there, there's a sensor, it fills up the bottle, it tracks the number of bottles saved, and I'm pretty sure we're up in at this point, we're probably up in the 18,000 we've had this past year. So just some examples of us working to have healthy and attractive choices for our staff, not only during regular times, but also during times when they may not be available otherwise. Our timesheet is coming up. This is when we, every 6 months, have a rotation on patrol. I kind of mentioned that. Ideally, we want, I think, 79. Of course, we can like more than 79 on day 1 of the timesheet to staff out all patrol teams. I think the best case scenario right now is you might get 73, meaning there's several openings on the timesheet or unfilled spots that we'll have to fill with overtime and fill or refill as people complete their training in the field training program. So we are continue to be short. We have come through the summer with everybody having worked at least 3 mandatory shifts of overtime, and that strategy barely saw us through. Lieutenant Hawk is our I'm just going to be an informer here. She is responsible for staffing out every week, doing the staffing and trying to make things work, and so we're looking forward to a time where she has more folks that she can fill in with the team, but that's a big job for her. We also began our voluntary security camera registry program, and although I'm mentioning to you now, I don't have a number. It's been live for, I think, 2 weeks. I'll get a number in terms of how we've done so far, but something to keep in mind. For the 3rd year straight, we're supporting the Berkeley High School Law and Social Justice class. We again filled 2 full classes at Berkeley High. These are typically juniors for a full year class with the focus on law and social justice. They'll do ride-alongs. We have folks, for example, like Sergeant Fomby and others who will do presentations to the classes, as well as they get exposed to a variety of related coursework through the extraordinary teacher there at Berkeley High during their program.
What's the name of that class, Chief?
Law and Social Justice. And finally, body-worn cameras. We anticipate the policy going out on about September 29th, and then training to start on October 22nd. There's a little bit of a gap there because of Project Bennett. Well, several reasons. We want to get the policy out. The project manager has some vacation, and several of us are at conferences, including the one that we're not in Naples, but also one where we're inviting a PRC commission to come with us. So that upsets the first couple weeks in October, but we're looking at October 22nd as anticipated start date for training. The way that training will happen, it'll start on a Monday, and as officers are trained, they'll start to wear and deploy the cameras. So over the course of a week, patrol will get trained up in the techniques. So that's our current plan.
So when are we going to be able to see the written policy?
28th, 29th. Yeah. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. We're going to open it up to questions. Just as a reminder, each commissioner gets 2 minutes to ask a question.
Chair,
I'm
a
sorry.
lot has happened since we last convened. I would request that we allow a bit more time for questions, the quite a lot of activity in the city. So I would ask that we be allowed, we certainly will try to respect the time of the commission, but I don't think we can function without information from the chief unless we have an opportunity. So I would ask that we waive that requirement for this meeting.
Okay, I will allow that, but I would ask that no commissioner go over about 5 to 6 minutes, because that is a lot, and looking at our time, we do have a very long agenda. So that's all right with you, Commissioner. Chief, did you have one more thing?
I'm sorry, I did. I brought today the after action report from the August 5th demonstration. It's been distributed to you. And out of respect for Commissioner Pritchett in particular, Commissioner Pritchett submitted a PRA, which had gone through channels. I was unaware that it had been issued back out to you with some responsive documents. I got the after action report last week and reviewed it today. Last week I was sick and at a retreat. Having reviewed it yesterday and today, have put it out. I've also distributed it through the city manager and going to the mayor and council. But that's the reason why it is coming after the you got the response, which I believe you gave to the PRC also. As it turns out, some sections of an after action report take way longer than the 72 hours that we probably over optimistically thought we could do it in terms of gathering data. But I just wanted to let you know that's why you're getting this now, and also that it's being distributed through the manager to the mayor and council.
Are there any more questions? Yes, Mr. Green.
Oh, I thought you were gonna ask something. Well, this carries us over into item 10B. And I consider that item, along with the report that we just got, one of the most critical issues facing this city and the Berkeley Police Department. Unfortunately, I did not get my packet in the mail. I had to go down to the office and get it yesterday in person, so I did not know, and I was out of Congress, so I did not know this item was on it. But I would request at this time that, because there's a lot I want to say in this, and just to give you two quick examples. I take exception in paragraph number 4 to the word extremist, and I take strong exception to the report and to the in the 5th paragraph there that
What item are you on?
I'm on item. Well, I'm referencing the report that he gave us, the after action report.
Okay.
So, which pertains to the August 5th demonstration, which is item 10B on our agenda. I'd like to take strong exception to sort of a phrase, and I'm open to discussion. I would ultimately enter the park illegally. I was there the whole time. In all due respect to the chief, who I got much respect for when he made his presentation. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, 2017. This is August 27, 2017, is that correct?
Yes.
I was there, and I was there when you gave your report to the city council. In all due respect, chief, we were in two different worlds at that time, because your report did not in any way fit what I saw and what I personally experienced. So I also would like to provide this commission with some documents that I think would be useful discussion. So in closing here, this is a critical issue of how this police department, how the California Highway Patrol handled a similar situation in Sacramento, how the DC police handled a similar situation during Trump's inauguration. The relationship between BPD and Antifa is a critical thing in my mind. It needs a lot of discussion and work through. So I would request that 10B would be postponed until the next meeting, and I will provide this commission with documents to be provided with that.
Is that something, is that something you can do?
Or if we're really crowded, I mean, this is not going away. We've been 2 years into a fascist administration in DC, and they're not gonna go away. Maybe it'll go away out on November 6th, but it isn't essential if it goes into October, but I do want some time for more prolonged discussion and provide this commission and the police department with some documents.
So I would just maybe suggest that we wait until we get to 10B, hoping that we do get to 10B today. And if we do, then we can discuss whether or not to postpone that.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
If that's all right. Are there any more questions for the chief?
Yeah, I had a couple. Chief, back to the body camera policy for a moment. Is there something that will show what changed in the versions?
Yes.
You have something like that?
Mhm.
Okay, good. And the other one is, you had a commitment to go to the council in September with the CPE, report. How's that doing on schedule?
Not good due to what's happened over the summer, so I think it'll be more likely November in terms of going to council or report to council.
On what now?
It's kind of the mixture of things. It's our response to a discussion about the recommendations in the CPE report, as well as recommendations in Councilmember Harrison's item, and I believe also there's PRC recommendations. So it's sort of going to be, I think, an omnibus report listed. Well, I've talked about what I intend for it to be, but having the time to do it has been impacted by other events.
It's kind of disappointing. It's been a long time.
I would rather be doing that than a whole bunch of other stuff that we've been doing for the past few
I
months.
understand.
Are there any more questions?
Chief, we're about to get a policy on body worn cameras. Is it your understanding that officers are already, I was surprised to hear that an officer had secretly reported a traffic stop. What policies or what guidance do officers have in that regard? Because I'm confused. And is that officer using their own personal camera, personal iPhone, or are they using the iPhone that was issued by the department?
Officers have been reporting traffic stops on small digital recorders for, I would say, decades.
Do we have any policies on that?
I can look to policy, but it's been a practice certainly for a long time.
But
As you
no
probably know,
policies that you're aware of?
That's not what I said. I can look into the policy side of it. It is a common practice in law enforcement. There's more than understanding, it's a matter of law that there's not a reasonable expectation of privacy when you're interacting with a uniformed police officer. And traffic officers have been reporting traffic stops on small digital recorders for decades.
Can I have a follow-up question to that?
Mhm.
What is the process by which those recordings are released to the public?
So I don't know if we've had any requests for reporting other than the one related to the traffic stop to Councilmember Bartlett.
And how did that come to the attention of, I mean, was it the police side that requested it of you?
Yes.
How did it even come to their attention?
Why would you know the answer to that?
Well,
Yeah,
I assume there must have been some communication.
During Berkeley side, I didn't have the media about what their source of information is. We received a PRA from Berkeley side asking for all documents related to the traffic stop and the audio recording. We released the CAD incident and declined to release their audio recording. And Berkeley side's attorneys, as far as I know, contacted the city attorney and
So it was nobody that-
objected to that, or essentially, objected to it not being released, and the city attorney, based on that objection, as far as I know, then
So
determined that we would need to release it under the government code.
as far as you know, nobody in the department let them know of the.
I don't know how they became aware of it.
Well, just for the record, it feels, I'm sort of disoriented because we're trying to work on this body worn camera policy. We were told that iPhones are being distributed, and I have not seen a draft of the body worn cameras policy that accounts for how those iPhones will be used. I know that you wrote a letter in February describing the iPhone, but I don't see it written in the policy. Now I've been in this city 30 years, I've never heard, I had no idea that Berkeley police officers were secretly public, and I'm curious about how that might, for example, a barbershop forum. Should we go there expecting that if we have a conversation with a police officer, that it may be recorded, and that it may be released to the news media? And how does that impact what you're calling community policing?
It's quite a loaded question, Mr. Pritchett. It is a matter of, I don't know how to say, like, okay, you didn't know for the past 20 years that police officers all over the country use digital recorders, especially motor cops on traffic stops. So you didn't know that, that's okay.
I was reading the policies. I thought these things were governed by policy.
You've been active in the world of oversight of police and civilian oversight for two and a half decades at least. And I'm just saying it's not a secret. I'm just saying it's not a secret.
That we had policies around
so, so I guess I can't account for that. I certainly would not expect that we're, recording, in the actual barbershop forum that officers are recording.
But you never know.
But we can certainly ask. We don't need to record. I mean, the news is going to be there. Channel 2 will be there recording. This is in part by Paul Chambers from Channel 2. And this is a public thing, but we're not interested in recording a community discussion. I'm not interested, I've never been interested in recording a community discussion, so.
Is there a policy that covers the recording of the audio recordings?
Do you
when
keep
to, when not to, when what's appropriate?
You're talking about, just for clarity, you're talking about on patrol cars for traffic stops? That's what
Say
we're
again?
talking, right? You're talking about on patrol cars for traffic
I'm
stops?
talking about anything that's recorded.
So I will look to see what policy there's been about that. I'm just sharing with you that it's my understanding that many motor officers have for a long time used audio recorders. There's not legally an expectation, a reasonable expectation of privacy in that encounter. And
So
that's
you
it.
know there's not a written policy on
I don't know that there's a written policy.
Well, for example,
it.
Los
I mean,
Angeles
it's a little
Police
different. I
Department.
mean, you would expect there would be, if you had a traffic stop, I mean, they're gonna be recording on body worn cameras too.
But at least you would know it.
Right,
You
yeah.
would see it.
Right.
And that's the
But past
difference.
that, then that becomes more problematic if it's not a legit stop or something like that, I think.
Well, I think a lot of members of the public, if they had known that their traffic stop might potentially be audio, they would know to request it. There's a lot of people who can't in this town can't even get a police report. And so now it's somehow, surprise, there's audio recordings. We don't know how they're cataloged. We don't know how long they're kept. We don't know how to act. I have no idea how to access them. The Los Angeles Police Department does say that officers can record those stops. They have to fill out a form. There's a paper trail that goes along with that. It's not just, hey, because it's hard to tell what is an individual officer and what is them as a person. Like, what's the difference? I'm sitting here being told that my personal email may be subject to scrutiny, and yet, police officers apparently, I don't know if the same thing applies to them, so I'm curious. But I'd like to move on.
But one point on that, I mean, maybe we ought to agendize this or something.
I think we should.
Because there's questions about, how is that gonna how will that relate to the body worn cameras? Is that gonna continue the same policy, or isn't it? Is the body worn gonna substitute for that? Blah, blah, blah. So I think it'd be good to get more information.
And what I feel that I'm sure that the individual officer is very professional, but I also think it's not really terribly fair to compare like that officer's professionalism to this council member's unprofessionalism when one of those people knew they were being recorded and one of them didn't. But I have a different question for the chief. Chief, the issue of tweeting came up, and whether the appropriateness of whether or not it was appropriate for the Berkeley Police Department to tweet out photographs of individuals who had been arrested on August 5th. Are there any policies or protocols that you're following that we could get access to? Or is this just an individual officer doing what they do?
No, there's a protocol that was a deliberate deliberate plan in terms of as one of many facets of our strategies for managing these events, where there's two non-permitted demonstrations where violence is likely to break out, and we're doing stuff, a whole array of things to try to preserve space for free speech and deter and remove opportunities for violence and for carrying of weapons and influence a riot. So there is a protocol that was made, and I'm unfortunately not tracking all the PRAs, but I expect we'll have that, if it's not already out. And tomorrow night at council, I think Councilmember Davila has an item on that addresses it, so that's
well, what I'm curious about is, we also have policies that say that, you know, trying to provide information to the public, be responsive to PRAs. In R23, it says that mugshots should be released unless it might endanger someone. Chief, I'm assuming that you're aware of the antagonisms between these groups.
Of course.
Okay. So, and you're familiar with what it means, what doxing, what that word means.
What's your question, Commissioner?
My question is, did it ever is it a violation of policy R23 to have distributed those photos knowing about the antagonisms between those groups and knowing about the practice of doxing and endangering those individuals whose photographs were displayed?
So I feel like your question has kind of facts or elements that aren't in evidence. I'm aware of the antagonism. I'm not aware of dangers, particular dangers or specific dangers. This was a decision to tweet out the arrest information and mugshots, the booking photos, as part of our effort to manage these incredibly novel and volatile and potentially violent events that we're responsible for managing. And I don't believe it's a violation of R23 that we did it. Certainly there is I guess one of the things that was most surprising to me is that we did it through all of last September, I think 5 different events. And there was no hue or cry that I'm aware of, and that from this event there was a big response where people were concerned about it. I appreciate the concerns, but I also appreciate the fact that we're grappling since February 1st of last year with how to manage these events where large and coordinated groups of people can come together and where there's the potential for violence and armed violence. And one of our primary strategies is to utilize the law and our surroundings and transmit information to people that, for example, carrying implements of riot is not going to be allowed in the parks, in these parks, on the stage during these times, and on the streets in this limited area on this specific day and time. So we do a lot of work to communicate that those are conditions for this area to whomever is interested in coming to these large, unsanctioned, non-permitted events. And we also feel it's a responsibility to report to the community and to respond, frankly, to massive media interest with reporting back to folks that we are enforcing those laws. The fact of the matter is, these demonstrations, going back, I'll say, to February 1st of last year, are an interest in these generations, an interest in driving and churning the counter narratives between people who are involved is the likes that I feel like I've never seen. I think that our community is being used as a place where people, many people, come from outside in order to battle it out. And our efforts are focused on making the community safe and taking those steps we can to let folks know that we will be enforcing the law and that we will be working to accomplish our mission of preserving space for freedom of speech and factoring out weapons and implements of riot from that area. And that's a big challenge. We have evolved in our approach since last year, through last year, and tweeting mugshots and arrest information, which is only done after we've really confirmed that we have the right person, that it's not just an instant thing, there's a process, is an element of our strategy since last September, and during which there was that I recall, no outcry.
Commissioner Ramsey.
Just have one question related to the tweeting of the mugshots. Is there a notice given in the 24? Well, I'm using the long term. First, there's the 24-hour notice. I think where there were prohibited items that was issued. As part of that notice of prohibited items, was it or is it possible to give a notice that if you get arrested pursuant to that provision, that you'll have your mugshot tweeted out? Right.
It was not. And I certainly am considering that that's absolutely something that we should do in order to kind of, let folks know that's a potential consequence. I think that's a good idea.
I have two questions. One is, it's unclear to me what the safety interest is in publishing these things after the fact. You say you're interested in these are potentially violent events, et cetera, and I understand that you want to arrest people. I'm not sure what safety interest publishing their mugshots achieves.
I think the safety interest has to do with deterrent. The safety interest is not the full interest really. Part of it is letting our community know and those know that we are active in working on the incident.
Okay, so my second question is, in that case, what does R23 mean to you? The way I read this policy, it says that we do not release to the media or to the public information about people in custody and so forth. In what case would that apply?
Which part of R23? We do release arrest information to the public. It's on our open data portal. And
it talks about the privacy rights of victims, witnesses, and suspects prior to release of any information, and then
I don't know if that's talking about releasing a person's booking information.
Section 7, employees shall not deliberately expose a person in the custody of this department to representatives of the media for the purpose of being photographed or televised.
So that section refers to I believe that section specifically refers to what is has been called the perp walk. Where you take an arrestee and you purposefully parade them or walk them by the media.
Well,
I think that's the origin of that. The policy itself is 9 years old, and so I believe that's what that refers to in our 20.
So in the interest of deterrence, you would publish the mugshots. Why doesn't this apply to other types of arrestees? Because these are extraordinary, to me, because these are extraordinary events that we're trying to manage and proactively manage. There are not, I'm not aware of other similar events. This is an extraordinary sort of event to manage, and we do our best to do that. In my mind, it's extraordinary in the opposite way. And that is, it's extraordinary in that you have antagonistic groups that would do harm to people on the other side. And you have a media, such as Fox News, which would exploit these images. It was all over Fox News. And so it seems to me, in the interest of privacy, it's even more important in cases like this to preserve people's privacy, knowing that it's going to go national and international.
So I don't think we can withstand the ability of the media to ask who's been arrested. Nor do I think that we can withstand a request for releasing a booking photo in that circumstance.
Well, I think this policy ought to be restricted in this way to be more in sync with what the policy really is, because it says here about protecting privacy as a priority.
I agree with you that the way that it's come up invites that we review R23, which was I think a 2009 policy. The world was different then, it was different now. And so I agree that that's a policy that merits review, and given the fact we're going to Lexipol as well, you know, as part of that process, I think it would be good to review it. But I, just so you're clear also on the media, I just want to say the media requests don't come just from Fox News. Our media requests come from all over.
Oh, I know.
They're massive.
But it's not, everyone gets it when somebody gets it.
Okay, I'm just saying we do get media requests from all over on this. When this interest fueled by, for example, by Twitter and propagating hashtags, this interest in these events is fueled. It does create a national interest, and we become under the spotlight of that. And so that's I think an element of what makes these extraordinary events to manage.
Yeah, I just would like to pick up on something I believe you said, and Commissioner Kitty said. These are extraordinary times, and the Berkeley Police Department is in starting 2 years ago in 2017, almost dealing with unprecedented situations, which in my lifetime I've never encountered. And I want to emphasize, by the way, just before I even ask the question here, we are just touching the tip of the iceberg of why I suggested earlier, because there's a lot here that I have not even had touched yet, but we're just scraping the surface of all that's been going on the last 2 years. We need a full item. But my point I was going to ask you, just comment on, is those people whose pictures were posted, you put their lives at risk. There are people out there who will try to do damage to them. And I want to ask you a question. How many, based on any of your knowledge, how many murders have been committed by Antifa in, say, the last 2 years?
Mr. Sherman, Antifa is a term used and understood broadly by a broad number of people. There's no way to answer that question, because Antifa means one thing to some people and one thing to another.
Let's put it this way: the opposite. If you want, let's broaden it out. Then let's just say those who stand up, whether it's Charlottesville or D.C. or Berkeley or Portland, whether they're Antifa, whether they're grandmothers against fascism. How many murders have been contributed to the opposition? 2.
I don't know, but I do know.
The answer is none. So let me ask you the next question.
Well, hold on a second.
No, I'm asking a question.
Well, my answer is that Miss Heyer was killed in Charlottesville.
Yes.
Through extremist violence.
That's correct.
And that as an example of our ensuring that doesn't happen in this community, one of the many strategies we used on August 5th was to barricade off the area around the park, so that we're trying to prevent vehicle-borne violence. So I just want to make it clear, we are very concerned about violence, regardless of the point of view.
I understand that, but the language that you use in the 4th paragraph, dozens of mass extremists, and that is Antifa, that's the code for Antifa. We all know that in this drawing.
Is there a better term?
Yes, anti-racist, anti-Nazis. Now, the next question I want to ask you is, according to a report from the Southern Poverty Law Count Center, 43 murders have been linked to the alt-right since 2014, 17 in 2017 alone. We had this case here where one of these people came into Berkeley on April 15th, I believe it was. One of the leaders, armed with all the stuff, was never arrested as far as I know, and then wind up slicing the throats of 2 men and stabbing another in the stomach in a tram in Portland because he was getting in the face of 2 high school students who happened to wear headscarves. So, your continuous attack here in this report that I read and in your presentation before the city council, always going after those people who have not committed murders, who are standing up to racism and fascism. You're hitting one group in this. And I wanna ask you this, with that, all those people whose pictures, I forget how many there were, somebody can fill
It
me in.
says 20, they say 20.
20 pictures were posted?
Not sure, 20 arrests, I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Of the pictures who were posted, were you able to identify those whether they came from the alt-right or the anti-fascist movement or some other source?
No, we don't make an effort to identify based on their viewpoints. We're making arrests based on conduct.
Or what they
And
did.
Or what they wear?
of what they wear. So, black bloc, if you're wearing a mask into a park on August 5th, you get arrested. There's video of that on YouTube. I guess I want to make it clear, these are applied, I want to say, I don't know if agnostically is the right word, but without reference to point of view. So there were a small number of whom I understand to be alt-right in the park on August 5th, and a ton of cops were there with instructions to arrest people in violation of the rules, and they're there looking and did not see anything that merited arrest. Now, I've looked at video, I've unfortunately kind of deep dived into YouTube videos made by lots of different sources from August 5th, and I didn't see, and that's an informal thing on my part, I didn't see in the hours of video I watched where I felt like, oh, there was a violation that an officer should have made an arrest for right away. So that's all I can honestly share with you. I mean, at this point, I take it very seriously. This is about the equal application of law, and we don't somehow check a box to say, oh, and by the way, the political viewpoint of the person.
You may not check a box, sir, but your report that you give out here on April 15th and on August 27th clearly point, and your presentation for the City Council after the August 27 demonstration, you did not even mention neo-Nazis once. It was all Antifa, anti-this, Antifa that. You did not, and you were criticized for it in wide circles, in the media and everything. That's why I'm saying we need a big discussion, because Antifa, whether you like it or not, is a critical, important part of the resistance to fascism in this country, coming from the White House on down to Martin Luther King Park. And for you to continually attack one side and talking about one set of mass extremists and ultimately entered the park illegally. No, they did not. The police, Albany police left, and there was a moment of sort of like nothing happened, and people climbed over those barricades you had so nobody could drive a car in the park. They did not storm the park like you described to the City Council, and it was reported in the media. They waited and said, the park is open, we don't have to go through the little narrow channel anymore, and they came into the park.
Mr. Roberts, with all due respect.
Sure.
I want to call out and acknowledge that I was there as well, and I'm sure there are a zillion witnesses. People with black masks, whatever you want to call them. There was a group of people who offloaded shields from a flatbed truck, who through the sound system of the truck called out to people to get away, that there may be violence. They popped smoke while they're facing a line of police officers. They scraped one person away, an older man who was leaning on a barricade, and they clearly moved him along and shoved him out of the way. And the decision was made to not have a fight between law enforcement and those people at that moment in that park at that time. And that was a decision that I'm 100% responsible for.
I think it was the right decision.
I appreciate that. But the fact of the matter is, you can go see videos where some people who came in the park after that moment, who were wearing black masks, went in and committed acts of violence against others. That's just a fact of it. There is video on it. And so I just have to take some issue with your framing of it. Because that moment where they're lined up with shields, masked up, telling people to get away because there's going to be violence, is not something that gets to be just discarded in there as far as I'm concerned. And I was equally concerned and voiced my opinion as a crowd left, including a big bunch of the folks who were wearing masks, as they went north past the police department, that this is kind of a community issue. I think there does need to be a discussion about that. If you're wearing a mask in violation of on August 5th, a couple of people were wearing masks, like straight black bloc, they're wearing the mask, they walked in the park. I talked to a couple cops, at least one of them said they yelled at someone who thought was like an organizer, like, hey, those guys are gonna get arrested, and they chose to ignore it and they got arrested. The fact that on August 27th of last year, where that park rule was in place, that several hundred folks in black masks entered the park with their masks on, doesn't make it any less illegal to enter the park, based on the rules that were in place for that day. So that's just is what it is. I think there's a lot of passion and perspective about it. And I have to say, my own kind of sense and understanding of how people are claiming Antifa as a virtuous undertaking to be anti-fascist, I think that's developed quite a bit. And I've talked to one person who straight up told me, I'm Antifa. Even at our planning meetings, Black Bloc doesn't listen, and they do stuff we don't want them to do. I don't want to be a part of that. So like, I'm having very honest conversation with folks. We're not arresting them. She's straight. I mean, she is identifying as Antifa. So I am sort of stepping away from using the word Antifa. I'm deliberately stepping away from that. Just, I can say masked or masked extremist, or I'm going to say Black Bloc, because I think when they say Black Bloc or they're blocked up, people understand those are folks wearing masks. That is a differentiator between, that's a differentiator that's important to keep in mind. And as we saw on August 5th, that group, which was denied entry to come into the park, ultimately went back to Ohlone Park, and some changed and returned not wearing masks, not carrying any implements of riot, and were allowed into the park. So that's what I know.
Madam Chair, we've had a good discussion here, but you know, in my opinion, I see things differently than some of you do in terms of you know, I think extraordinary issues need extraordinary solutions, and I think that the department has had some of those. I agree with I understand the issue about the mask and the Antifa and all that. I personally don't think there's any place for masks in any of this. I think if you have a mask on, you ought to be out of there. So my point here is not to debate it anymore, is that we have a discussion going on here. Maybe we ought to agendize this. We haven't pulled the whole, you know, the whole meeting, taken the whole meeting to kind of do this. And it seems like everybody's got an opinion that we should put it on the agenda and maybe have a discussion about giving feedback formally to the department on behalf of the PRC.
So I think this is kind of incorporated in number 10B. So
one final statement. One sentence.
Okay, one sentence, but we really
Just for the record, Chief, I am not a member of Antifa.
Ms. Kujit, is your question related to this?
It's a statement. And it's not, it's relative to our conversation.
Okay, I would like to point out that this is agendized though, so we will
What
be
I wanna
having this
point out,
conversation again.
Madam Chair, is that I'm having a very difficult time, because I think many of us recognize the limitations that are imposed on the PRC in regard to the Board of Inquiry process, and that for various reasons, it is a flawed process. The PRC then, what are we supposed to do? Oh, it's supposed to be about policy. But as I sit here today, what I hear is that some policies we're gonna follow sometimes. We'll follow them when we want to, when we don't feel like, even as far as the PRA that I asked, you know, August 9th, and it takes 4+ weeks to get a response in violation of the California Public Records Act. That what I see is officers secretly and without any check or a balance or accountability on their recordings get to record public officials and leak it to the media. I don't know where accountability is here. I don't know what policies they're bound to respect. You know, if they decide this is an unusual occurrence, boom. You know, my understanding is that it was only protest-related arrests that were tweeted out, that it is not a moral practice, that the considerations about people's safety were waived in favor of making the department look like it was doing something. and to counter a negative narrative about how the violence was occurring because BPD wasn't being tough enough. And so this makes BPD look tougher. But I don't feel like that's a good way to govern a police department or a city. And I don't understand what we're doing here. And the chief can confidently say, well, wait till the Lexapos. We'll get rid of those pesky privacy concerns that are written into the policies that we have now. We can get rid of those. Let Lexapol wash away all those little civil liberties snafus. So I find it very discouraging, and I would love to hear somebody say something about accountability or what policies stick. What is the police department bound to do? Because this idea of getting an after-action report 5 minutes or at the start of our meeting, when I have been told that they are an investigative document, and no, of course you can't have them. And when I file a public record, now I'm told that if I file a Public Records Act with the city, then somehow that's going to invite them into my email.
So I think this is a very important
So
conversation,
madness.
but it is on our agenda, so we'll be discussing it at a later time, and I think there's a lot of getting our thoughts together and thinking how we can approach this. So I do like Commissioner Shogan's suggestion of taking up item 10B next meeting, but we can see when we get there. I think we really do need to move on.
Point of privilege, final comment for the chief, point of privilege. 1 minute, 1 second. Chief, just for the record, and this will come up more, and I'll read you some of the emails I sent. I am not a member of Antifa. But they have my complete and total support, and when I go out there to face Nazis, I'm glad that they have my back if one of them comes up with a pepper spray and beats me over the head like happened to me in April 15th. I'm glad they got my back, got me out of there, gave me medical attention, you know, because I am not going to stand and let Nazis come into Martin Luther King Park. I'm not dressed in black, I'm too old to be running fast and stuff like that, but I'm damn glad that Antifa's got my back.
Okay, is it a quick comment?
Totally separate, unrelated question.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, it's something I sort of forgot to bring up before, but I talked to some of the officers at Coffee with the Cop. I noticed in all the time that I've been on the commission, only once was the Police Officer Association had a representative here. I know they felt some frustration, apparently, at least from talking to some police officers, but I would ask if we could request that they come back. There are several times I've had questions that I'd like to pose to them, but they're not here. I know they said they felt that they came often and no questions were posed to them, but I would like to make that request.
I would respectfully respond that it'd be appropriate to make that request through the PRC, directly to the Berkeley Police Association. I think that's the way that request. Pardon?
Do we have to agendize that?
I don't mean to agendize it. I'm just suggesting I can pass that along,
Yeah,
but I think it's more effective for the commission to pass along.
I think if all the other commissioners agree, we can just ask Ms. Lee to reach out to them.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to the subcommittee reports. General Order Subcommittee, thank you, Chief. Your report. General Order Subcommittee.
I think there was some amount of frustration on the part of the subcommittee about what exactly they were to do. And now that I'm thinking about it, I may have dropped the ball in not following up on the last exchange about what we were going to do.
And my
So,
memory is
I
that
think-
we just didn't know what we were supposed to be doing,
Right, and I thought that
but we had the authority to do it.
And, well, the authority is to certainly review and comment. And I thought, I was trying to do a thorough job of explaining what your role was. And just a reminder for the rest of the commission, this, General Order C-64 subcommittee was formed following the December 2014 wrap-up, and did work with the department on revising C-64 and U2. And then there was our last piece was the Commander's Guide, which did not get released at the same time. So that was
So is 64 and U2 finished?
Yeah, they were done
So
and
the only
brought
thing
back to
left,
the
the only thing
commission.
left is the commander's guide?
Right,
So-
right.
So that's the task.
It's not clear to me what the review consists of. That's what's not clear to me. I mean, and we met,
I mean, I think we read it, and then we give it to the chief, and we wait for the chief to respond.
we give what to the chief?
Our
Your
feedback,
comments, your feedback.
and then, I mean, although I'm not sure that that strategy's working, frankly.
Well, we haven't done it.
We have many times.
Is that it for this one?
Well, okay, here's the one good question that you asked at your meeting, Commissioner Calavita, was, has this been in effect? And in fact, the commander's guide was in effect and used, according to BPD, through 2017, and all the crowd control, crowd management events that where it was needed. So, I don't know if you feel like you don't want to go any further, but it's up to you. I don't know if your conversation about specifically August 5th may raise some issues that are related to the commander's guide, and if you should fold in the review that way.
It's okay with me to do it that way.
I feel like it feels like pouring water into a bucket with a big hole in the bottom of it. We sent the June 20th report, that was back in February. Body worn cameras has been on his desk. The CPE report, recommendations, wait. There's nothing coming back to us. So yeah, we could give up our hours, and what I'm saying is I need some assurance. I think maybe there's a different question here. Commissioners, we can continue to do this, to review policies that are disregarded, ignored, never responded to. Maybe that is the issue that we should be addressing. And maybe we should ask for help from the city council or the city manager or somebody in terms of having I don't understand the rules around here anymore. So I'm gonna respectfully withdraw from that subcommittee.
From that task? Okay.
Because I don't understand what the usefulness of it, and I would ask us to agendize, the issue of responsiveness from BPD management. That it is undermining the Police Review Commission process, what's left of it.
Could I suggest this? Does somebody want to make a motion to dissolve this subcommittee and perhaps consider the Commander's Guide to Traffic Control as part of any review of August 5th?
I make that motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye. Oh, sorry.
When do we get to, I'm reading the commission's mission statement on page 35 of our packet tonight. The general purpose of the Police Review Commission is to provide for community participation in setting and reviewing police department policies, practices, and procedures. It seems to me if we dissolve this subcommittee, we just say, okay, that's not our mission anymore. And if it is our mission, then we need some way of figuring out, it says setting and reviewing police department policies. I don't know what that really means, but we can provide feedback and what? I don't know.
What does it say? Well, where are you at on?
It's the first statement of our mission.
So to that, I will say that we have reviewed policies in the past as a whole in meetings.
And
So it's not
there's-
necessarily that policies have to go through the subcommittee for us to review them.
Well,
But I think the bottom line is, it's up to us as to what we're gonna prioritize to take on. And, like it or not, we only have certain ability to influence the policy.
That's right,
We don't approve the policies.
no.
But we can influence them, we hope. We tried to get a little more foothold in that with the ballot measure, but that died.
Right.
So we're back where we started. And it becomes, in my opinion, it's like, well, where do we want to invest our effort? What are the key priorities? And then how do we get our comments together so that we're not just, 9 individuals, sort of venting. We have to somehow come together as a commission and tell this system what we want, either the manager or the council or whatever, and prioritize our efforts. That's about the best we could do. So in my mind, the bottom line here is, so is anybody interested in reviewing the commander's guide and making changes to it? It was a big deal back in 2014, and then it was revised, and then it was gonna be a second look at it, as I recall. But it had to do with how the situations are managed. And so if nobody has a lot of issues about that and don't want to review it, then we wouldn't review it.
I don't understand that it was revised in light of our recommendations.
I don't think it was necessarily, do you recall how that went?
It was, okay.
I think some of our recommendations
some.
went in, but then there were some further things that needed to be done. And along the way, they had to have some kind of operating, procedures, and so they adopted what they had.
After December 2014, this body did a review, and the department did its own internal review. The PRC and the department each came up with reports and recommendations. And then one of the results was the subcommittee, in which a member of the BPD attended all the subcommittee meetings, and together they worked out a policy that revisions of the policies that came back to the commission and were approved. So that's an example of where.
So there was some substantive input.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think Andrea and I are feeling a little bit like not that excited about being in the subcommittee, not
Right.
because we don't have issues or not because we're not interested, but because it feels like we don't have any, influence.
Right, and I think part of the issue is that because the problems that were identified happened a while ago, and, you just don't remember what exactly, I was around at the time, there was a general sense that, in December 2014, there was too much of an emphasis on crowd control rather than crowd management. So the first focus is now managing the crowd, assuming that things are going to be peaceful, not using force or displaying force, until, crime is being committed, as an example of change in approach.
I think on the influence part, I think we do have influence. We may not be getting everything everybody wants, but we influence the body camera policy, no doubt. I was on that committee. I spent time with the department. It changed from what they originally submitted. We did the surveillance ordinance, same kind of thing. There have been other things that we've had influence on that have made a difference. And so, we don't get all the I's and T's taken care of always that we all want, but we do have influence. Now, sometimes it is like kind of pulling impacted wisdom teeth to get stuff in front of the folks that can make some changes when we're not satisfied. But we have to have energy around, let's say, for example, on the commander's guide, if there are still issues on there, then we want to take them on and have a position as a commission, we should advance them.
So just to remember, there's a motion on the floor, so I'd like to ask every commissioner if you have an opinion on whether or not the subcommittee should be dissolved, and
Who's on the subcommittee, Chair?
just
Two of you?
yes, and if we should take a look at the commander's guide
Neither one.
before we take a vote on the
What was the
motion.
question?
And neither one of you wants to serve anymore on it?
We've only had one meeting and it was, didn't go
Or
anywhere.
do either one of you want to continue serving on it?
Well, Commissioner Pritchett just pulled out of the subcommittee.
Okay. And
I don't mind serving on it if there's something substantive to be done.
is there anyone
I don't like
else who
spinning
wants to
wheels.
serve on it?
So my suggestion would be if there's not anything that the subcommittee has to do right now, then we dissolve it, and if there's an issue that comes up that the commission wants to take on, we can create a new subcommittee to focus on a specific issue.
And the group as a whole can look at specific issues that we're all concerned with.
Yes, or we can create a subcommittee if we want to delve deeper into it.
All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
What is the procedure? So if for example, I believe that policy P29 was violated by the distribution of the mugshots, and R23 as well. I don't know how to move with that, and what's troubling is that when, when you're, Commissioner Roberts, you cited body-worn cameras as that you were able to have, the commission was able to influence that policy. But when I sit here and hear that officers may be secretly recording people, it feels strange. It feels like, on the one hand, like, well, maybe you did influence the writing of that policy, but the way that the actual,
Well, that's a different
the way that
issue.
it's actually, the implementation is going down, and that's not an individual, that's not a policy complaint, because we had a policy.
Well, it's a different issue, it's not just, it isn't body worn cameras. I mean, that's why we should put that one on the agenda to decide. The chief said there is no policy on that. Well, we ought to follow up and find out why and how it affects the world, and if we wanna do anything about it.
I agree with Commissioner Roberts that we need to have like a place that we're going with it. If we think it's wrong, we should definitely agendize it, and
But
make
if
a
the
motion.
policies are being violated, right? And it's not individual, it's not a board of inquiry situation. Right, this is management making decisions about how to move forward. I don't understand how we proceed.
Commissioner Ritchie?
And I guess there's two ways you could go about it. You could file a complaint as a private citizen against the officer, and then that would trigger a board of inquiry process. Beyond that, you can make a recommendation about policy changes that should be made. So whether it's a resolution to get a policy change, whether it's implement a policy, whether it's make clear a current policy, you can do that in a resolution, either vote to direct it towards the city, to the chief of police, or the police department. You could choose to direct it towards the city manager, or you could choose to direct it towards city council. But it seems to me that those are your two different channels. So if you believe that you wanna have some disciplinary action taken, you should file a complaint as a private citizen with the police commission.
Yeah, it's like getting that information to know who's responsible.
Well, yeah, the name was published in the Berkeley Police Department, Berkeley side, name of the police officer, if that's your interest.
Sorry, so back to the motion, is there any more discussion about the specific motion on the table?
That's okay.
The
What about
motion,
dissolving the subcommittee?
temporary
Yes,
disbandment?
Ms. Lee, would you please read back the motion?
Yeah, the motion is to dissolve the General Order C-64, et cetera, subcommittee and consider the commander's, review of the commander's guide in conjunction with any review that may occur of the August 5th events.
And did you wanna add also, and if necessary, it can be reestablished as part of your resolution?
That's
The
not
subcommittee?
necessary.
No, just ask.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion on this motion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed?
I'm sorry, I was in favor.
Alright, so it's
That was a
unanimous.
aye?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to the homeless encampment subcommittee.
I do have a report about the new administrative regulation that's supposed to come out from the city manager.
Regarding the North Plaza.
No, about, this was the overarching one that's supposed to come out about homeless encampments that we've been waiting for. It was close to final, and then the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision came down, so it's being, now it went back for another look, so.
you know,
And-
the homeless encampment subcommittee has not met.
Well, I think you were waiting for the policy to come out to look for it.
We're waiting,
Yeah,
but we
look at
also, just for the record, access to, I continue to protest the denial of my ability to be able to get close enough so that I can actually observe what's happening, when they're dissolving a homeless encampment. That coupled with the denial of after-action reports means that the function of the PRC subcommittee and thus our reporting is absolutely gutted because we have no factual information upon which to base any recommendations.
Actually, the issue of the after-action reports is agendized later, and actually I had spoken informally with the chief, I'm sorry, he's gone before we had a chance to discuss this. Other than I think it was last February, right, the big dismantling of City Hall encampment, the chief said, the other encampment actions, there were no after-action reports. So you can leave it on the agenda if you want to hear it from him. He said there were just, a couple officers on standby.
But who would know because there's no after-action report?
So, I don't know. Well,
If our job is to monitor and hold accountable, if we only have information from the chief, then we can't really do that. If we're just supposed to trust what he says, then why are we here?
Is that it for the homeless encampment subcommittee?
I think so.
Okay, lexical policy subcommittee?
Yeah, I'm happy to report for it. George Perez is the chair. We've been moving forward. We've had 2 meetings. First meeting was really to set the agenda for how we move forward in the remaining policies. Approximately 180 policies which have been provided to us by the police department, the training and policies department. We had our first meeting 2 weeks ago, I think it was, on the 17th. No, I can't remember the exact date.
29th.
29th, and we reviewed approximately 40 policies and compared them to the current general orders and discussed any differences. There were maybe 3 or 4 that we had some questions about. So we've been working well with BPD. They had a representative there from training. Actually, one time we had 2. They also had the captain there. So, they want to start pushing these out, and so we wanted to get them 40 so that they could push them out right away. Like I said, 20 had some changes, and 20 were ones that were actually just from the general orders and not lexical policies. And there were some changes to those that they had questions as well. So now I'm rambling, but the next meeting is the 17th
So
of
you are
September.
confirmed for that date?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, September 17th, but I would encourage everyone, if there are specific policies that you're interested in, to come to a meeting and discuss them. I mean, obviously, don't have to go over all 180. We've marked 10 that we thought would be of particular interest to the commission as a whole. So maybe when we're going over there we can send out to me. The other thing is the lexical. What I've requested, I'm not sure whether this has happened, just so you know, is we're getting the lexical policy, the general order, and then a red line of the 2 essentially, so that you can see the changes. And we're getting the sheets from lexical which explain why they have done certain things in policy, whether it's requirement by federal law, requirement by state law, or something they see as best practices, so that we can actually see what the motivation for those are, so that we can get input from the community. I'm not sure whether those policies have been posted yet on the website, or those documents.
No, is that, I didn't understand that you wanted those to be posted?
Yeah, I think that's the way we can get, and look, we've reviewed everything, so.
The ones that you reviewed?
But the ones that that's the way the public, if they can at least look at them, if they have input that they want to put into the subcommittee meeting, that's where I would think that would be done. at least initially, and then we can take their comments as well. No one, no one other than the commissioners and the police department attended those meetings, but just so the public can have some opportunity to put some input, I think that would be helpful. Our recommendations on the 40 and the changes too, we're obviously gonna push up to the commission as a whole, so.
Right, Commissioner Perzvella has asked me to agendize it for the next meeting.
Right, so we have these blocks of 40, so you're gonna get a block here. I mean, people will see it then too, but just as a subcommittee member, it's helpful to the extent that if people have comments about particular policies, I can see them and come report their concerns or appreciation for the changes to the subcommittee. It is moving forward, and it's moving forward quickly, and it's something that the police department wants us to work on quickly because they've been working on these policies for a long time, so. Like I said, we knocked out 40, and we're probably gonna try to do the same amount on 17.
Are you just going down and continuing to go in order?
Well, we did not go completely in order. We took the first 20, and then in order, and then we took the first 20 policies that were just from the Berkeley general orders and did not have lexical input. There were some minor changes to some of those that we had concerned about, and we raised those and raised suggestions. We had a constructive, productive discussion with the training and policies department about some issues, and I think they appreciated it. And we're going to go back with some of the questions and come back to us later, and we'll obviously push those up to the commission. But we're not going to wait till we're done with them because the police department wants to get going on it. So we're going to be pushing them out as we review them. And if anybody wants the input, they are welcome to come to the subcommittee. I mean, if they don't come to the subcommittee, then they're not going to have an input until it gets to the commission.
What time do you meet and where do you meet?
So our next meeting, we meet here, right in this room, and the next meeting is on the 17th at 7 p.m.
That's a Monday.
How many people are in
That's
your
a number, 3 people, myself, Ari, and George.
So,
Myself, Ari, and George.
so only allowed to have one commissioner.
Only one additional commissioner can attend, because,
Yeah, I mean, it was open to everyone, so.
No, Brown had.
No, I know, but initially, we were the only 3 who volunteered to do it.
This is this Monday?
Yes.
yes.
The only 3 commissioners who volunteered to be on the subcommittee were us 3. And George, I had the pressure.
Okay. Only 4
Can serve.
commissioners can serve, and only, if you have 3 commissioners on the subcommittee, only 1 additional commissioner can show up. Otherwise, when there's 5 of you, you're a quorum,
Okay,
and
now we're a full commission.
Is there someone else who wants
They
to?
can't, they're not allowed to show up in their individual capacities. as a private citizen.
no.
All right.
Can you join?
One of you can show up.
What are we gonna see coming back through? We're gonna see four versions of this thing, or just your recommendation, or?
Well, I
what are
think
we
you,
gonna see?
look, we haven't figured out what I suspect we will do is you'll see the documents that we looked at,
Yeah,
right, for each of the policies. And that, like I said, would be a lexical cover sheet in some form, which talks about
right.
the reasoning behind them, the general order that's equivalent, if there was one, and then the red line,
Mm-hmm.
and,
Then what you
and the
recommend?
lexical original policy, because there's the lexical. So those 4 things, and then on top of that, you will have some report, with respect to that block of policies, with questions that we had, hopefully with some answers from the police department, and if there are no answers, then, we'll still pass on our concerns, and see what concerns we raise.
So what's do you have a sense of the general, what is the general tendency as these things are transferred into lexical language and so forth? What do you see?
I see a couple things. Well, first of all, I do think the police department is making an effort, for the most part, to come at it from the perspective of maintaining the current Berkeley general orders. So that's the sort of Berkeley, the Berkeley general orders, the thrust of Berkeley. So they are taking the Lexipol policies essentially as a starting point to have two things. One, a uniform format for policies, and two, policies from some source that considers the latest issues in case law or statutory changes, either in state law or federal law. So they have not in the past had the manpower to dedicate from the police department itself to keep track of these updates. So they are then looking at the Lexipol policies as a starting point, but comparing them to or they have compared them to the Berkeley Police Department general orders, making sure that there's not something that's unique to the city that is not reflected into the Lexipol policy, or Lexipol policy taking a posture that is contradictory, that contradicts something in those Berkeley specific policies. So with the red line, we can see any of the differences, and we are looking through the red lines to see, well, okay, what is the reason for these? Sometimes it's as simple as you have to put in the name of the actual office in Berkeley that deals with a particular issue. But other times it's a little bit more complicated, and then we will look to the Lexipol justification for a particular change. If it's for an update for a statutory change or case law change that's required by law, then there's a reason at that point to deviate from the prior policy. If there's not, if it's just the rationale is best practices from Lexipol, we are comparing them to the Berkeley policy and generally recommending that the Berkeley policy trump, because those have obviously been vetted previously. There have been a couple of times where there was a Berkeley policy that maybe there was a reason, or that now has been changed and that Lexipol doesn't recommend it. I'll give one example. Official email used by the police department. There was some question about whether it should say that the language about the requirement to only use the Berkeley email for official business. It used to be sort of absolute, that you're prohibited from using it for non-official business other than some union parties or whatever. I mean, some basic stuff. There was a recommendation in the new policy that it would say should. So we were saying, well, we don't understand this, why is that changing, right? And that was not a Lexipol change. That had come from the internal discussion of the police department. Well, we were recommending saying that this should be an absolute rule. So those are the things so far. We are not taking on the most controversial ones right away because we want to try to get the police department in a position that they can start to push these policies out at the rate that they want. And so there are ones that we could do that weren't as controversial. So we can provide the list to the commission for the 10 that we've tapped that we think will be hotter items or subject to more contentious discussions.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, we can move on to old business now. 9A, Commissioner Pickle, that was your item. I believe we received a response from the city attorney.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did, and my response is that I'm still a bit perplexed, but there are times when on a given item that appears on our agenda, we decide to take this action or take that action. It's very hard to describe what action you're going to take before you've had a discussion. So I'm proposing that we adopt language that would say, what I would like is a standing item that says, request for additional information relative to any topic appearing on this agenda, so that we could brace the public for the possibility that we might seek additional information before taking action on some item. I don't think that would be in violation of the Brown Act, frankly.
Well, I think though, if it's an item on the agenda, we can request more information on it. It's the items that come out of the blue that they're saying you can't do. If it's on the agenda, you could request all the information you want, or we can as a commission. But if it's something that is not related and it's a different discussion, that's the one
Well, that's interesting, because that's not how I've
I think
understood
that's the way it is.
our workings, because we follow an agenda when we're here. In the course of our discussion of a particular topic, it has come up that, yes, I would like more information, could we ask for that information? And I have been told we were not able to do that.
I think that's in relation to matters that come up when you're having a discussion with the chief, perhaps, or maybe even with me. Those that are not agendized. But anytime.
So are you saying that if I was having a discussion about if on the agenda we said that the homeless encampment subcommittee wants to PRA the after action report, that we would be empowered to do so?
Well, if the homeless encampment subcommittee passed a recommendation that it asked the full commission to.
I'm saying in the course of our report back.
Right.
To this body. Which theoretically is more comprehensive than a subcommittee. So if the subcommittee says, well, this happened on April 4th, and then there's some discussion, and they say, well, do we know how many officers were involved? They say, no, we don't know. Well, why don't we go ahead and file why don't we ask for that information? Are you saying that we are allowed to do that?
If the subcommittee made that recommendation?
No.
Requested? Oh.
No.
Okay,
I'm saying in the course of our conversation,
I see.
our report back from our subcommittee,
Mhm.
if in the course of receiving that report back, the commission said, we need more information.
They can do it.
Are you telling me now that the PRC is
No.
empowered to make a public?
No, I
record
think you,
request?
on the agenda would have to say, homeless encampment subcommittee report on April 4th. Then I think the commission would be okay in making a request for information.
Okay, what I'm not saying is that the subcommittee is asking for additional information. I'm not saying.
I got that.
As long as it's on the agenda, we can request more information about it.
Right,
Yeah.
the specific topic, not anything related, I mean, I don't think.
For example, if the chief says he's gonna talk about crime, budget, staffing, training updates, and other items, are we allowed to make information requests? This is appearing on the agenda.
It's not,
So,
it's not on the agenda for discussion and action, it's a report.
so we would have to say, for discussion and action?
Right. But, no, that wouldn't save it, actually, because the subject, the topics of crime, budget, staffing, training updates, and other items are not specific enough to inform the public what might be discussed. In other words, there's a lot of issues related to crime, obviously, and the budget. I mean, those are just very general categories. I mean, the way it was described to me was, is there enough information on the agenda so that a civilian who's reading it can get enough information and say, oh yeah, I care enough about this that I want to come and hear what the commission is going to discuss, what their deliberations are going to be.
I mean, it's sort of a paradox because it's a seeking of information. So,
I don't see the paradox. If it's on the agenda, if it's agendized with enough specificity, you can ask for additional information. Anything under old business, new business, you can ask for more information.
so for example, when we do a review policy on use of body worn cameras, including sufficiency of provisions on use of associated iPhones, can we do a Public Records Act request
Yeah,
for
you can.
emails and discussions related to the implementation of the iPhone policy? We could do that tonight. We don't
You
have to
could do that
agendize
tonight.
it for the next meeting.
No,
No,
you could do it tonight.
you could do it tonight.
My goodness.
Are there any more questions about this item? Or, I move that we move on from this. Is that-
I'm so
Your facial.
perplexed. It feels like the way that is coming down has been so not that way.
You
I
know,
think it's very straightforward.
So you're saying the only time when I can't do it is when we're having the chief's report?
When it's vague.
No, you can't do it during my report, you can't do it during approval of the agenda. I'm saying the only time you.
If it's above the line, if it's above the line, above old business, you cannot ask. If it's below the line, you can ask.
If your subcommittee report said, if the subcommittee report under General Order C-64 said, something like Commander's Guide, recommendations about Commander's Guide, and then you probably would have something in the packet for people to look at that were the recommendations. And another commissioner said, I don't feel comfortable doing this, I think we really need to see X document, and we don't have X document. So we should request more information before we can approve these recommendations on the Commander's Guide. I would say that is sufficient.
I look forward to that.
Well, you know, the other, it really is bizarre that it's difficult to get information. I think that's the whole point. But I think on the one side, we've established now it's on the agenda, you can make a request for information, right? So you just have to say, we need more information on this, you agree, and if you agree, we'll just vote on it and ask for the information. The other thing is that, the city attorney was responding to having a standing item on the agenda. But even in the chief's questioning, for example, I don't see any problem with if we need more information from the chief on a particular thing we're talking about, that we move to get more information and ask him to do it and then agendize it, and then that's when the public would know what we're gonna be talking about. I mean, we'd be talking about it on the next agenda. So I'm not sure if that goes exactly with what the city attorney said, but it seems to me that it's practical way to go about it. And we just gotta operate that way. But you gotta get a vote to ask for,
Over and over again,
three
we've been
PRAs.
stopped from doing that though.
Pardon?
Commissioner, we've been stopped from doing that. That's what gave rise, as far as I understand, what gave rise to this conversation.
What do you mean we've been
That what I
stopped?
was trying to do was get rid of the extra 2 weeks lag time. That we have a discussion here, and then I have been told that we needed to agendize a request for information. Am I the only person who remembers that?
No, so we can't make an official request to the Department for Information.
I think we're just making
without
it too
being an agenda
complicated.
item.
I agree.
I don't see any problem, many times we'll say, Kathy, can you get some more information on this or
I think
something like that?
sometimes it
No, and then
depends.
we're told we have to agendize.
And if we're
Sometimes
talking
it
to the
depends
chief,
on the
pardon?
scope. Sometimes it depends on the scope of what you're asking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, if you're gonna make a PRA request, no, you can't do that
Yeah,
under the chief's report.
Yeah.
You can't, because it hasn't been there's
no,
a
I wouldn't
specific.
think you could do that,
No,
no,
okay,
right, I wouldn't do that.
So it seems to me that there's no action to be made on this item right now. I'm gonna request that we move on.
I guess I'll be excited to see if it actually works. I look forward to that.
Okay, on 9B, Commissioner Ramsey, this was your item, and
Yeah.
I think Ms. Lee just,
I think we got the answer to it.
Yeah.
I had spoken to the chief, so.
Say your 9B.
There's no documents to be had.
yes.
That's what we want. We wanted confirmation. This was, just as a reminder, this was about the homeless encampment after action reports. Commissioner Pritchett had made a request for these through a public record request. They had indicated they were investigative documents and so that they couldn't be provided to us. I had a question about documents that were actually more than 6 months old, even though it says the past 6 months, because it seemed to me at that point there was no investigative purpose. The chief said that he would go back and look into it and see whether there were documents at all. We either wanted confirmation that there were no documents, or see whether we could get the ones that were passed in and sort of investigated. Long answer to the now is confirmed that there are no documents, so I'll withdraw this from the bill.
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay, here's what's kind of maddening, is that there's a policy that says that there have to be after action reports. There's 72 hours to create these reports. In 2014, the investigation of the Black Lives Matter protests, I think it was recommendation number 24 or 27, that said, yes, actually, the Berkeley Police Department should follow its general order and create timely after-action reports.
Just have a point of order. I mean, not to cut you off, but we got to get out of here. We have other stuff on the agenda, and that's not related to my agenda item. My agenda item was trying to get the reports. Now, we've gotten the answer to that. Now, if somebody wants to talk about whether reports should be written and so forth, that's a different issue. But
Yeah, if you would like to agendize that, I would say agendize it, but Commissioner Ramsey has withdrawn his item.
With respect, we approved an agenda.
I mean, I agree with that, but this issue has been addressed about whether we could get the reports. We now know that there are no reports.
If I may motivate another agenda item?
Okay, for next meeting, but it seems like we have a lot to get through.
Yeah, if you'd like to ask Ms. Lee to put it on the agenda.
What's the agenda item?
I was getting to that, actually. The fact is that at various, can I just say what I was going to say? That there is a requirement that after action reports be written.
For what?
For major events, I can't remember the particular language, but certainly for events like the Black Lives Matter protests. Now the question, apparently we have to review that policy because we've been told they've gotten out of writing after action reports because he says, oh, well, this is a spontaneous event or an unusual occurrence or whatever language they're using to say we don't need to write an accounting of these events. When you take 30 officers and you dismantle 30 tents and encampment that large, is that a spontaneous event or an unusual occurrence? I don't know, but it seems like there should be some accountability. Now here I'm told in these things that they're investigative documents and they're not subject to release by the Public Records Act. So which is it? That's what I want to find out. Because this item comes because we were told that it was an not because there wasn't one. Now the story changes to just there wasn't one. But the story I was given was that it was an investigative document. Are after action reports investigative or not?
Okay, so we can agendize that for the next meeting, and for now we'll move on to 9B.
I mean, also relative to this after action report, since I waited because I thought it was on our agenda.
It is, in 10B, we'll be discussing that.
All right, just then go ahead and put after action reports and Public Records Act requests in compliance with Public Records Act.
Okay. So 9C was my item, and just to give a little background to new commissioners, this came on the agenda, I put this on the agenda after a meeting where there seemed to be a lot of tension on the commission and talk about our role with the BPD and the way that we support them. I had come up with these, it's on page 17, sort of guiding principles. But I do understand that I have been gone for a while, so I want to limit this discussion to about 5 minutes, just to ask whether or not this is something the commission would still like to pursue, and if so, if anybody has any suggestions and changes. I know that it was a very rough draft, so I don't want to spend a lot of time like correcting everything. I can go back and do that on my own if this is something the commission thinks is still necessary. So yeah, I'll open it up to discussion. If anyone has any thoughts.
I have a couple thoughts. You know, I think if we're gonna do something like this, we need to spend a little more time sort of strengthening it up so that it gets to where, you know, what we wanted to accomplish. So that would be the first decision, what are we trying to accomplish? And then we all agree on that. And more in particular, my thoughts were looking at the text. Is that I felt that like the second paragraph was problematic. I felt like that the bullets we could add more meat to. For example, something about establishing formats to open up some consistent dialogue with BPD management and as many officers as possible, for example, or to have other goodwill things in there. For example, one of the things that I think we're really delinquent on is processing employee commendations and recommendations in a timely manner. I mean, we put these on there, they carried over for 3 agendas and all that. I mean, they ought to be like one of the first things we ought to go for. And that is, if people should be recognized, we should recognize them. And maybe even have some people the people get multiple commendations, ask them to come to the meeting and shake their hand or something, the officers. And something to do with, act with respect in all discussions, both for the BPD and between commissioners. Something like that. That would strengthen it up if we're gonna go that way. The last thing I would have is that we ought to ask the chief what ought to be in here to help if we're really about trying to work more effectively and professionally with the department.
But also recommend the Police Officers Association.
Yeah.
This is an area that I want to be able to get some input from the Police Officers Association. This would help when we're changing if we do need to change regulations in response to the guiding principles to address these new conversions.
Yes.
So a relationship is meant to go both ways. What are we asking for from the department?
We can add that in there as well.
I think everything if we do something like that, everything in there would be something that we want to have the department accepting of and participating in. That's basically what we would be doing.
I'm asking, is it okay, guiding principles, that we ask them for the timely response to our requests?
Possibly, yeah.
That we revise this relationship because it feels a little one-sided, really. And I'm also, in terms of guiding principles, the folks who are not in the room are folks who have lost faith that the Police Review Commission is capable of holding police accountable. And so I'm curious how we're reaching out to the people of Berkeley and welcoming them into this process. I assume you're indicating that through Facebook, some live stream.
Yes.
I hope that's true, but sadly, I'm not sure it's enough.
I do what I can.
No, I appreciate your efforts.
Any more suggestions, thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first decision we have to make is if we're gonna take this on at this point or not. And if we are, then we need to put some more effort into it.
Maybe I can suggest that, I wrote down everybody's suggestions, so I can try to flesh it out, and then send it, to Miss Lee, so she can send it out to everybody, hopefully within like a week, so that, we can get feedback before the next meeting, of commissioners, whether or not this looks like something we wanna take on, given all of the incorporated suggestions, and then if, more suggestions come up, you can email them to Miss Lee or bring them to the next meeting, just to discuss this more efficiently. Is that all right with everyone?
I would also suggest, and certainly in recent times, I sympathize with my fellow Commissioner Pritchett here's frustration. But at the same time, I think that when you look at this, we also need to list the achievements that the Berkeley Police Department has done over the decades. I can't even begin to think off the top of my head, but we could go down and make a list, and I could go back and look at it. Berkeley Police Department was the first department to do X and Y and Z, that became models for police departments all around this country. Some on their own, some in collaboration with us, some at the suggestion of us. So if we're gonna, if we talk about accountability, measure what do we ask for the department, and in terms of maybe accountability, yeah, we have honest, legitimate, heard them all listed today, complaints and issues with the Berkeley Police Department. But I think we also have to acknowledge that the Berkeley Police Department has made some remarkable achievements over the decades, some on their own, being the first department to do so many things for the first time that other departments have picked up nationwide. So give credit, criticize when criticism is due, and give credit when credit is due at the same time.
Well, I agree with the kudos for the department. I think what we just need to understand is what's our mission that we're trying to accomplish here. Because to me, I was reading this guiding principles for a better partnership going forward. And the kind of the list of accomplishments is relevant, but it's not sort of about going forward. So that would be one comment. But the other I would suggest to you do, if you're going to revise this, is that you send it over to the chief and say, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Do you have any feedback? And what would that be? Because at least we'll, if we're gonna do something and we're gonna be a partnership, then we need to get input from the other partner.
Okay, thank you, that was very helpful. Any more comments? Okay, then I'm gonna suggest that we move on to 9D, which, as we know, we do not have the policy. So, unless there's any discussion, I would like to move to postpone this item until next meeting. 9D.
I'm sorry, 9B?
9D.
9D.
Since we don't have the policy yet.
Well,
I second that motion.
Is there any discussion about the motion?
well, I just have a question.
Yes.
So, again, it doesn't matter what we think or do, because they're going to roll out the body cameras with iPhones, and that's all kind of a done deal. And so we're just sort of rubber stamping it, right?
Not the way I see it.
Not the way I see it.
Somebody, then please clarify
We're
for
gonna have a
me.
robust discussion. They're gonna show us the policy, and once we have it, you can talk to the cows.
But my question,
You can't tonight talk about policy.
You don't have the clock.
mean, that's it. I mean,
No,
we're-
I thought what I heard the
we're
chief
saying
say was
for
that he was rolling it out.
Yeah, he said
So it
we-
doesn't matter what we
Say that.
think about the
We will give our
policy.
input,
was
we don't, we're not, like, we don't have the authority to make the policy, but we'll give our input. Nobody's saying that we taking this off the agenda, we're saying we're trying to table it, have the next
I'm just
meeting.
trying to figure out what we're trying to do, I'm just trying to figure out
We're
what
gonna
we're
try to
looking for.
discuss the policy.
You've had a subcommittee and this body's been working, how long, Terry, have you been working on body cams?
3 years.
Long time.
3 years, okay. And it's been a long time, long drawn out process, I've done back and forth here and there and every which way. And now we're gonna get a we're gonna be presented with, as Commissioner Ramsey just stated, we're gonna be presented with a policy on the 29th.
That's what the
And
chief
let's
said.
see how much it fits in, let's wait till we get the policy and
Yeah.
see how much they've adopted of ours. And we may have issues with certain bits and pieces of the policy, but it's not like they're presenting a policy where we've had no input on. We've been working on this for 3 years.
The way I see it,
You
is
guys,
it comes
I'm
down to the
just asking a
29th.
question.
That's why I asked the chief if he's gonna have something in there that'll show the original stuff versus what changed. So kind of the red line, he said he would have that, so we'll be able to see what changed. There was an original BPD version of the policy, there was a PRC version to the policy that went to the council and went to the BPA and all that, so there's a lot of players that had to negotiate. And so and the bottom line, after all the negotiations, this is what the chief came up with. And, we're gonna see it, I mean, his intent is to implement it, I think, because he's got kind of a deal.
Right.
But to me, if we have 2 or 3 issues that are still out there that we can't live with, then we ought to raise the issues, send them back, and try to get some action on it in the near future. I mean, that's kind of the way I think it would go down.
Agree with you 100%.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so as far as the motion goes, are we ready to vote?
No.
Okay, all in
What are we
favor?
voting on?
To table this until next meeting. All in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, so it's unanimous.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't get the movers and seconders.
I moved